The smell of stale citrus cleaner never truly left the skin. It clung to the pores, a sharp, artificial top note masking the deeper scent of damp concrete and the low, electric hum of 30-story server towers. Arthur's thumb rubbed the edge of a copper coin hidden in his pocket. The metal was smooth, worn down to a featureless disc by 15 years of restless friction. Across the polished expanse of the floor, the reflection of the fluorescent light stretched like white spears. Every night, the routine demanded the same devotion: push the heavy gray cart, guide the microfiber mop in overlapping loops, and keep the eyes anchored to the floor. On the 84th floor of the Vanguard Zenith Group, the air tasted different. It tasted of filtered oxygen, expensive cologne, and the faint, bitter metallic tang of impending ruin. Through the double-paned glass of the main boardroom, the city below was a sprawling grid of amber and white fire, veins of light pulsing under a heavy violet sky. Inside, the atmosphere was suffocatingly dense. Elena Vance's fingers tore at the edge of a pristine white napkin. A diamond the size of a hazelnut caught the sterile overhead light, casting a sharp blue glare across the glass table. Her heels, 4-inch spikes of matte black leather, struck the hardwood perimeter of the room with the precise cadence of a metronome. Click. 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 12 minutes, Elena said. Her voice lacked the theatricality of the press conferences. It was a low, jagged rasp, sanded down by 18 hours of dry coffee and panic. 12 minutes before the automated ledger synchronizes with the federal oversight node. If that vault remains sealed, the liquidity variance becomes public. Marcus Vance, her brother and the senior vice president whose name occupied the lower half of the brass directory downstairs, did not look up. A bead of sweat had escaped his hairline, tracking a slow, glistening path down the side of his jaw before soaking into the collar of a custom-tailored Egyptian cotton shirt. His right hand methodically turned a gold fountain pen over and over. Thump. 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 The cap was missing. The midnight blue ink had already stained the pad of his index finger into a dark bruise. The hydraulic seal is jammed from the internal cylinder, Elena, Marcus muttered, his teeth clicking together on the final syllable. We've had the architectural team from Zurich on a secure line for 6 hours. They built the mechanism. They don't have the override sequence for a physical seizure. Beside him sat Arthur's cart, parked just outside the threshold of the open glass door. Arthur kept his back to them, his shoulders hunched within the faded denim jacket that had seen 3 separate linings wear through at the elbows. He wrung the mop. The dirty water dropped into the plastic bucket with a heavy, rhythmic plop, plop, plop. To the executives, he was a fixture of the architecture, no more notable than the automated climate control vents or the shadow cast by the rubber plant in the corner. He was the silhouette that cleared the paper cups and emptied the shredded documents containing secrets that could collapse mid-sized banking institutions. We bring in the heavy equipment, Marcus said, his voice rising, thinning at the edges. The thermal lances. We cut through the secondary hinge. A man in a wrinkled charcoal suit, Dr. Cross, the lead mechanical consultant brought in from the regional laboratory, let out a dry, humorless bark. He didn't look up from his tablet, where a 3-dimensional wireframe model of the vault door rotated in a slow, useless loop of red and green lines. A thermal lance against 4 inches of reinforced titanium carbide matrix? Cross didn't look at Marcus, he spoke to the glass table. The heat transfer alone would fuse the locking pins into the frame within 40 seconds. You wouldn't be opening a vault, you'd be creating a permanent tomb for $300 billion in bearer bonds and hard storage ledgers. We'd need 4 days to drill it out with a diamond core. You have. He glanced at his watch. 9 minutes. Elena stopped pacing. Her reflection in the glass window seemed to hang over the glittering city like a ghost. Her jaw feathered, the muscle along her cheek tightening until the skin went pale. "There is no option where that vault stays shut," she whispered. The tone was quiet, but it carried the weight of 5,000 employees whose pensions were tied to the opening bell at 9 o'clock the next morning. If the node registers the vault as offline, the algorithmic short sellers will pick us apart before the sun reaches the harbor. Outside the glass, Arthur moved his mop. He didn't look up, but his ears tracked the frequency of their panic. He knew the vault door. He had wiped the dust from its chrome circumference every Tuesday night for 7 years. He knew the sound the massive locking bolts made when they slid home, a deep, resonant tum that vibrated through the soles of his boots. Tonight, when he had passed it at 9, the sound had been different. A wet, choked click. The sound of something small and hard caught in the throat of a giant. He reached into his pocket, his calloused thumb once again finding the smooth face of the copper coin. The hallway outside the executive suite smelled of burnt insulation. 2 hours prior, a team of specialized safe crackers, brought in from an unnamed firm in New Jersey under a strict non-disclosure agreement, had attempted to use a high-frequency acoustic resonator against the vault's primary dial. They had left 40 minutes ago. Their equipment bags had banged against the elevator walls in a sullen, defeated rhythm. The only remnant of their presence was a smear of dark grease near the floor molding and the faint, ozone stench of a fried amplifier. Elena Vance stood before the vault door now. The circular slab of steel was 8 feet in diameter, set into a wall of solid granite block. It didn't look like a machine, it looked like a moon fallen from the sky, cold and silver, reflecting the desperate faces of the 3 people who stood before it. "Try the manual release lever again," Marcus said, his hand twitching toward his tie. He had pulled it free from the collar now, it hung around his neck like a deflated noose. "The lever is decoupled, Marcus," Dr. Cross said, his voice flat with the exhaustion of a man who had exhausted his intelligence. He stood with his hands deep in his pockets, his leather shoes scuffing the marble floor. "The internal clutch requires 30 foot-pounds of counter-pressure to engage the teeth. The solenoid is dead. The computer thinks the door is open, so it won't send the signal to drop the pressure. It's an ideological loop. The machine is lying to itself." "Then force the signal," Elena commanded. Her eyes were wide, the pupils tiny black dots surrounded by veins of red. She hadn't blinked in 2 minutes. "You have the diagnostic terminal right there." Cross pointed a finger at a small metal access panel that hung open beneath the main dial, its internal wires hanging out like the guts of a mechanical beast. "The diagnostic terminal is powered through the same bus that failed. I can bridge the gap with a copper wire, but without the physical resistance on the 3rd gear, the motor will just spin until the coil burns out. We need 3 things simultaneously: the digital bridge, the manual torque on the lever, and the alignment of the internal tumbler. We only have 2 hands for the tools and no way to see inside the casing." He dropped his arms to his sides. The gesture was final. It was the movement of a doctor stepping away from an operating table. Arthur stood 10 feet away, leaning lightly on the aluminum handle of his mop. His gray work shirt had his name, Arthur, embroidered in faded red cursive over the left pocket. The R was unraveling, a long thread of crimson nylon hanging down toward his belt. Marcus turned, his eyes wild as they scanned the empty corridor, looking for someone to blame, someone to carry the weight of the disaster. His gaze landed on Arthur. The sight of the gray uniform, the yellow bucket, and the wet string mop seemed to trigger something raw in his throat. "What are you still doing up here?" Marcus snapped, his voice cracking with the strain. "Clear out. Take that garbage down to the basement. We don't need the help tracking dirt over the floor while the house burns down." Arthur didn't move immediately. He let his eyes travel from Marcus's stained fingers, past Elena's white-knuckled grip on her napkin, down to the base of the vault door where the grease smear lay black against the white stone. "The third gear isn't stripped," Arthur said. The voice was low, gravelly from years of silence and night shifts. It was a voice that hadn't been used for anything more than "good evening" or "excuse me" in over a decade. The room fell completely silent, save for the hum of the server racks 3 rooms away. Marcus stared at him, his mouth slightly open, his eyebrows twisting into an expression of profound irritation. "What did you say?" "The third gear," Arthur repeated, his tone flat, devoid of fear or deference. He pointed a thick, calloused finger toward the open access panel. "It's not stripped. It's jammed." Around 7 tonight, the maintenance crew washed the intake vents on the ceiling above the door. They used a high-pressure wash. Some of the lime scale from the old pipe broke loose. It fell through the ventilation gap right into the housing. A piece of calcium about the size of a pumpkin seed is sitting between the teeth of the secondary dog leg. Dr. Cross turned slowly, his eyes narrowing as he looked at the man in the denim jacket. "And how exactly do you think you know the internal clearance of a Class 9 secure vault, my friend?" Arthur took a slow step forward, leaving his mop against the wall. His boots made no sound on the floor. The rubber soles had been worn smooth years ago. "Because I'm the one who cleans the grease traps under the carriage every Saturday," Arthur said. "And because before I spent 15 years holding that mop, I spent 12 years maintaining the hydraulic presses at the Bethlehem Steel Works that rolled the plate for this exact model." Marcus let out a short, sharp laugh that sounded like a dry branch snapping. "A steel worker. Marvelous. Elena, why are we listening to the janitor? Get him out of here before he touches something and triples our liability." But Elena Vance didn't laugh. She didn't look at her brother. Her eyes were fixed on Arthur's hands. They were large hands, the skin split at the knuckles and healed into thick, white ridges of scar tissue. The nails were short, clean, but stained around the quick with the permanent black-gray of machine oil. They were the hands of a man who understood the language of iron. She looked at her watch. 11:53 p.m. 7 minutes. "Marcus," she said softly. "Shut up." Elena took 3 steps toward Arthur. The fragrance of her perfume, something expensive, sharp, like crushed pine needles and dry amber, hit him first, followed by the intense, cold heat of her focus. "Can you clear it?" she asked. "Elena, this is absurd," Marcus interjected, stepping between them. "He's a contract cleaner. He carries a bucket for a living. If he disrupts the tumbler alignment further, the secondary glass relocker will trip. If that glass breaks, the door is dead forever. We'll have to blast it out with thermite." Arthur looked past Marcus, his eyes steady on Elena. "The glass relocker trips if the top pin drops more than 3 mm without the keyway engaged. Your experts from New Jersey tried to use an acoustic resonance tool. They didn't realize the housing was cast iron, not forged steel. The vibration didn't open the pins, it just packed the calcium deposit tighter into the teeth." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his hands. Along with the worn copper coin, he produced a small, L-shaped piece of stiff wire, a heavy-duty paperclip he had straightened and filed down on the edge of the concrete loading dock 3 months ago to clean the lint out of his cart's wheel bearings. "I need 2 minutes," Arthur said. "And I need your brother to stop talking." Dr. Cross stepped back, raising his hands in a gesture of scientific neutrality. "At this point, the mathematical probability of success via traditional means is 0. Let the man look." Elena nodded once. "Do it. If you open it, name your price. If you break it, you were never here." Arthur walked past Marcus, who smelled of cold sweat and stale gin. He knelt before the vault door. The stone floor was ice cold against his knees, the thin fabric of his work pants offering no protection. He didn't mind. The cold was a familiar weight. He leaned his head close to the metal opening, his left ear almost touching the cold chrome of the dial. He didn't look at the wires, he didn't need to. He knew the geography of the machine by heart. "Dr. Cross," Arthur said, his fingers maneuvering the wire into the narrow gap beneath the third gear. "Take that diagnostic terminal. See the blue wire with the white stripe? Strip it back an inch. Don't touch the ground wire." Cross hesitated for a fraction of a second, then knelt beside him, his expensive suit trousers wrinkling against the floor. He used a small pocket knife to peel back the insulation. "Done. When I tell you," Arthur said, "bridge that blue wire to the second terminal screw on the left. Not the first. The first will blow the fuse in the main panel. The second will bypass the logic gate and force the motor to pull against the jamb." "Understood," Cross muttered, his breath coming short. Arthur closed his eyes. The world narrowed down to the tips of his fingers and the small, stiff wire in his right hand. He felt the texture of the internal mechanism through the metal tool, the oily smoothness of the grease, the gritty resistance of the lime deposit. He fished into the dark cavity, his movements minute, almost imperceptible. To Marcus, he looked like a man trying to retrieve a dropped coin from a grate. To Cross, the precision was obvious. Arthur's wrist was rock steady, his breath regular, slow. Click. A tiny sound, no louder than a cricket's leg snapping in the grass. "The lime is loose," Arthur whispered. "It's out of the teeth." "We still have the solenoid issue," Cross said, his eyes on his watch. 11:56 p.m. "The motor won't turn without the manual pressure on the exterior clutch." Arthur looked up at Elena. "I need your hands." She didn't hesitate. She knelt in her black skirt, her knees hitting the marble beside his dusty boots. "Take the big lever," Arthur told her. "The long chrome bar beneath the dial. You need to pull it upward. Not down. It feels like it wants to go down because gravity helps, but the counterweight is flipped when the power is out. Pull it up until you feel the iron teeth bite into each other. It's going to hurt your hands. The edges are sharp." Elena reached out. Her manicured fingers, pale and smooth against the dark iron, wrapped around the cold, heavy bar. She pulled upward. Her face contorted as the weight of the 4-ton door resisted her. The metal cut into her palms, the diamond ring turned on her finger, the stone pressing deep into the flesh of her adjacent digit. "It's too heavy," she gasped, her shoulders shaking. "It won't move." Arthur didn't take the lever from her. He placed his large, scarred hand over hers, his palm covering her knuckles, providing the brute force she lacked while leaving her fingers in control of the angle. The contrast was stark, the white, soft hand of the woman who owned the building, encased by the dark, weathered hide of the man who scrubbed its floors. "On 3, Arthur said. Cross, get ready with the bridge. Standing by, Cross said, his hand trembling slightly above the wire. 1, Arthur counted. He felt the tension in Elena's arm, the muscle tightening beneath her silk sleeve. 2. Inside the wall, a small click signaled the automated system entering its final minute before synchronization. 3. Pull. Arthur threw his weight into the lever. The raw force of his shoulder, developed over decades of shifting heavy machinery and water-logged steel buckets, transferred through Elena's hands into the mechanical core of the vault. A terrible, grinding screech echoed from within the wall, the sound of long dormant iron teeth tearing through 70 pounds of static pressure. Now, Cross! Arthur roared. Cross slammed the bare blue wire against the second terminal screw. A bright, blue spark erupted from the panel, casting long, frantic shadows against the ceiling. The smell of ozone flared instantly, thick and choking. For a second, nothing happened. The lever stayed frozen. Elena let out a sharp cry of pain as the metal seemed to push back against their combined strength. Marcus stood behind them, his hands over his ears, his eyes shut tight as if waiting for an explosion. Then, deep within the vault's chest, something broke. It wasn't the sound of failure, it was the magnificent, heavy thump-thump-thump of the 6 primary locking pins retracting into the frame one by one. The internal motor hummed, a low, vibrant growl that grew smoother as the grease redistributed through the gears. The massive 8-foot steel door shifted forward half an inch, its perimeter seal releasing with a soft, pneumatic hiss that smelled of old paper, cold air, and 60 years of undisturbed dust. The door swung open 2 inches, revealing the dark, cavernous vault inside, where rows of small green lights on the secondary secure servers glowed in perfect, unbroken lines. Dr. Cross fell back onto his haunches, letting out a long, shuddering breath. He looked at his tablet. The red wireframe had turned entirely green. The time was 11:58 and 42 seconds p.m. Synchronization successful, Cross said, his voice barely audible. The ledger is online. We're clean. Marcus opened his eyes, slumped against the wood-paneled wall, his face gray. He let his breath out in a ragged gasp, his hand instantly going to his breast pocket to find a handkerchief that wasn't there. Elena didn't move. She remained on her knees, her hands still resting on the chrome lever, her head bowed. Her palms were red, scored with deep, angry impressions from the metal cross-hatching, and a single drop of dark blood was forming near the base of her thumb where her ring had bitten into the skin. Arthur stood up slowly. His joints let out a series of dry pops that sounded remarkably like the vault pins. He didn't look at the vault. He didn't look at the servers. He walked back to his gray plastic cart, took hold of the aluminum mop handle, and dipped the strings back into the yellow bucket. Plop. You should get some ice on that hand, Ms. Vance, Arthur said, his back to her as he began to mop away the black grease smear left by the New Jersey safe crackers. The lime scale is gone, but the secondary seal will need a new gasket by Tuesday or it'll stick again. Marcus straightened his jacket, his confidence returning like water filling a dry ditch. He stepped forward, reaching into his coat for his wallet. Yes, well. Brilliant work, old man. Truly. A spectacular bit of practical knowledge. Let's see, what's the night rate for emergency maintenance? 500? Let's make it 1,000. Write it off as structural repair. He pulled out a thick stack of $100 bills, his fingers flicking through them with the practiced ease of an auctioneer. Arthur didn't look up from the floor. Keep your money, Mr. Vance. I'm on the clock until 5. My hourly is $22.50. The company already pays it. Arthur, Elena said. Her voice wasn't the voice of the CEO commanding a boardroom. It was quiet, clear, and carried a strange, heavy resonance that made Marcus stop his counting mid-bill. She stood up from the floor. She didn't wipe the dust from her skirt. She didn't adjust her hair. She walked past her brother, her eyes fixed on the man in the denim jacket. Marcus, Elena said, her eyes never leaving Arthur. Leave the room. Take Dr. Cross and go down to the security office. Verify the external log transmission yourself. Elena, the press release for the morning market needs. Go, she said. The word was small, but it had the finality of a guillotine. Marcus looked at Arthur, then at his sister, his mouth twitching with a mixture of confusion and resentment. He turned on his heel and walked out, his leather shoes clicking rapidly down the corridor. Dr. Cross followed him, his tablet tucked under his arm, casting one last, fascinated glance over his shoulder at the janitor. The boardroom was dead silent again, save for the rhythmic swish-swish of Arthur's mop against the stone. You knew about the Bethlehem plates, Elena said, leaning against the edge of the mahogany table. Her hands were folded in her lap, hiding the blood on her palm. My father worked the furnace, Arthur said, his voice rhythmic, matching his strokes. I worked the finishing rollers. We made the shell for the Class 9s between 78 and 82. You can tell by the grain of the steel. The newer ones from the German foundries are too smooth, they don't hold the oil right. They dry out after 10 years. This old girl just needed someone who knew how she breathed. Elena watched him. She looked at the fraying R on his pocket. She looked at his boots, which were split at the toe where the steel safety cap met the leather. A man who knows how a $3 billion corporation breathes shouldn't be emptying its wastebaskets, Arthur, she said. The wastebaskets don't talk back, Arthur said simply. And at 5 in the morning, when I go home, the job stays here. My daughter is 12. She needs her father at the kitchen table, not on a secure line to Zurich at midnight. Elena took a slow breath. She reached down to her left hand and slowly, deliberately, slid the diamond ring off her finger. The skin beneath was white and indented. She placed the ring on the edge of the mahogany table, where it glittered like a small, cold star against the dark wood. My father built this company on the premise that the smartest person in the room is the one who actually touches the iron, she said. Her voice had dropped an octave, entering that quiet, dangerous space where real decisions are made. For 7 years, I've watched my board by algorithms, consultants, and European architecture. Tonight, $300 billion was saved by a man with a piece of wire and $22 an hour. She stepped away from the table, walking until she was standing 3 feet from his cart. I don't need a vice president of operations who knows how to loosen his tie when the ship starts sinking, she said. I need someone who knows where the scale forms in the pipes. Arthur stopped the mop. He looked down at the diamond ring on the table, then up at her face. I told you, Ms. Vance. I have a daughter. I don't do corporate hours. Then we changed the hours, Elena said. She didn't blink. The position of Director of Physical Infrastructure doesn't have hours. It has results. You work when the machines need you. The rest of the time, you sit at your kitchen table. She reached out her hand, the left one, the one with the raw red mark where the ring had been. The board will laugh, Arthur said, his lips twitching into the ghost of a smile. They'll see the gray shirt and the name tag. Let them laugh, Elena Vance said, her jaw tightening with that familiar, iron certainty. Until they need to check the ledger. Do we have a contract, Arthur? Arthur looked at her hand. He reached into his pocket, his fingers brushing the smooth copper coin one last time, leaving it at the bottom of the dark fabric. He pulled his hand out, large and black lined with oil, and wrapped it around hers. The secondary seal needs that gasket by Tuesday, he said. I'll buy it tomorrow on my way in. Epilogue, the 6 o'clock shift. The sun was just breaking over the eastern bridges when Arthur stepped out of the lobby of the Vanguard Zenith building. The air was cold, smelling of salt from the river and the first exhaust fumes of the morning buses. He walked down the concrete steps, his denim jacket buttoned to the throat against the damp chill. In his pocket, the copper coin felt light. Across the street, the early edition of the financial papers was being unloaded from the back of a box truck. The headline, visible in bold black ink through the plastic wrap, read, Vanguard Zenith reports record liquidity synchronization, shares rally. Arthur pulled his collar up, turned his face away from the wind, and started the long walk toward the subway station. He had a 12-year-old to wake up for school, and the kitchen table was waiting.